I start today with a poem that you may have already heard. It's called Autobiography in five short chapters by Portia Nelson. Chapter 1. I walk down the street and there's a deep hole in the sidewalk. I fall in. I'm lost. I'm helpless. It's not my fault. It takes me forever to find my way out. Chapter 2. I walk down the same street and there's a deep hole in the sidewalk. I pretend not to see it. I fall in again. I can't believe I'm in the same place, but it isn't my fault. It still takes me a long time to get out. Chapter 3. I walk down the same street. There's a deep hole in the sidewalk. I see it there. I still fall in. It's habit. My eyes are open and I know where I am. It's probably my fault. I get out immediately. Chapter 4. I walk down the same street. There's a deep hole in the sidewalk. I walk around it. And Chapter 5. I walk down another street. Yes, and we laugh at that because it's nonsensical, but it's how we live life. Think of your own life journey in that first chapter. I walk down the street and there's a deep hole in the sidewalk. I fall in. I'm lost. I'm helpless. It isn't my fault. It takes me forever to find my way out. Our individual journeys probably have moments where we've found ourselves at the mercy of life. We can't always control what comes our way. If we live on the coasts of Florida, hurricanes come and can wash our life away. We might see companies that we work for go out of business and leaving us without a job. The passing of friends and family leaves us feeling grief and feeling sad. So think about what your response is when you fall into that deep hole in the sidewalk of life. For me, it's, oh my, what the heck happened? Oh, really? Feels a little lost. Feels a little dark in there. We're not always sure where to go or what to do. We might be filled with anxiety, despair in the darkness. But we realize that, this is the nature of life. Sometimes things happen that we just don't have charge over. And we might struggle to find our way out of those deep holes in our sidewalk. We also know that as we live mindfully, as we pay attention to our life and where we are and what we're doing, if we're present to the moment, we can see some of those holes in the sidewalk and we can skip over them or walk around them. Chapter 2. I walk down the same street and there's a deep hole in the sidewalk. I pretend I don't see it. I fall in again and I can't believe I'm in the same place. But it isn't my fault. It still takes me a long time to get out of it. So have you found yourself in that same place in life again? That same relationship that's not working? Maybe it's a different person, but the relationship feels the same. Yeah, we do that. Maybe it's the boss. We end up with the same kind of boss in our jobs that expects too much of us, makes us feel unworthy, etc. Maybe we're in the midst of that argument that word for word it happens. They say this, I say that, and there we go down that dark hole, that deep hole in the sidewalk. Perhaps someone showing up doing what they always do, And we react the way we always react. I see people smiling and laughing, so that tells me I'm not alone in that experience. There's probably more than one of us that do that. So when we're in those places, we can sometimes think, oh my gosh, when is this going to stop happening to me? When are they going to stop behaving that way? Why do they keep doing this? They're making me miserable. And we want to try to fix and change them. But we know in reality that we don't have the power to change another person, nor do we have the right to change another person. Every one of us is on our very own intimate and personal journey. And there we go, trying to change them, trying to fix them. If people would behave better or differently, make better choices, I wouldn't be uncomfortable. So we think, yes. But we know in our heart that we can't change them, that we can change ourselves. Chapter 3. I walk down the same street. There's a deep hole in the sidewalk. I still fall in. It's a habit. My eyes are open. I know where I am. It's my fault. I immediately get out. With time, we recognize over and over again having the same experience. Maybe the environment changes, maybe the face of the person changes. We begin to think that it's not coincidence that we're having these kinds of experiences over and over again. Maybe that repetition becomes a pattern, and when we do it several times, we can see that pattern. And then from that pattern, we can gain great awareness. We initially feel like it's not our fault. And then we see, perhaps I'm contributing to whatever it is that puts me in this position, into this experience, into this job, into this relationship. So we can ask ourselves, what am I contributing that allows this to happen? So when we have those moments that we say, well, it's not my fault, but here I am again, don't blame me, we can give ourselves a time out. And we can ask ourselves, how am I showing up? What am I contributing? What are the beliefs that I hold about myself, about the rest of the world, that puts me in this scenario yet again? Do I see the world through the eyes of Eeyore, or do I see the world through the eyes of Tigger? Now, you know who Eeyore and Tigger are. Yes. So Eeyore is, gloom, despair, agony for me, nothing ever works. And then Tigger is Mr. Positivity. So maybe we're somewhere in between those. So we ask ourselves what we contribute, and we fall into that same hole enough times, we recognize the patterns, and we recognize that we are responsible, that we're not victims of other people. That's a terrible way to have to live, being the victim of everybody else's whims and fancies. We realize that we are the ones that need to change the way we expect, the intentions that we set. We recognize that we're responsible for where we are. And yes, the whole world is around us moving and gyrating, but we can choose. And while that task might feel very daunting and even difficult at times, when we recognize that we are not at the mercy of other people to have happiness, joy, and love in our life, we have charge of ourselves. We might not be in control of life, but we are in charge of us. And we discover that when we're willing to be the change in ourselves, we impact our life. And when we recognize where we are, how we view the world, what's our attitude about the world? Is the world a safe, friendly, warm place to live, or is the world the enemy? When we begin to trust that the universe is here supporting our good, all of the universe is here supporting our good, we begin to shift and move in a different direction. We consciously choose our responses in the day. We consciously are aware of what thoughts we're holding. And that calls us to mindful living, being present to here and now, being present to those thoughts that tumble in our mind randomly and the thoughts that we invite to stay. Just because a gloomy thought comes into my mind, it doesn't have to build camp there. We can thank it for coming, thank it for giving our attention, and send it on its way. And the thoughts of peace and joy and harmony that come, we can cling to them, we can hold on to them, knowing that as we hold our energy around them, they grow and they spread from us to others. And it's that practice of mindfulness, knowing what is moving for us and what is happening. Then we choose our responses. So when I was raising my children, I was often fashionably late. And I had a very dear friend who didn't have children, so she was always early. I would show up and she would be, yeah, you're late again. And for me, when I got to be mindful and recognize that, yes, I was literally not honoring her time. I was honoring my children, but she didn't have that perspective. I could choose how I responded. Instead of, oh, yeah, I love your sarcasm, I could say, I understand that I kept you waiting. I was stuck in traffic and I'm really sorry. Or I could say, one of my children couldn't find what they needed and it took me a little longer. I really appreciate you waiting for me. I know you may have been concerned. So I recognize their feeling of frustration with me, and I can alleviate it in a kind way that diffuses everything. She's honored. She feels like I've respected her time, even though I was still late. Can't change that. But how I respond to her is very different. I can set a different intention for how we go forward. We move through this time and recognize our thoughts and recognize our responsibility in our life. And we do that without placing blame, without putting shame on where we are. Because we are where we are, right? And sometimes we tumble into that deep hole before we know what's happened. There we are again. So without any shame or guilt or blame, we just recognize, here's where we are. I don't want to be here again. How can I avoid this hole in the sidewalk? And just grow through it. We can learn the gift that's presented by that deep hole in the sidewalk. Because every experience we have can gift us wisdom and understanding. And it can propel us onward to live our truth, to enhance our self-worth, to see ourselves as the divine sees us, to recognize that goodness that we're all born into, to recognize that we're part of this allness of creation. We're part of each other. We're part of this beautiful landscape outside. We can recognize that and do that with gentleness and kindness and compassion towards ourselves. Chapter 4. You walk down the same street. There's a deep hole in the sidewalk, but we walk around it. Oh, it's a new day. It's a whole new day. We miss the hole in the sidewalk. And we're triumphant with our success for not having gone into that dark place. So we celebrate all the growth that we've experienced. We celebrate that we've overcome falling into those deep holes in the sidewalk. It truly is a new day. My unity teachings tell me that I co-create my life by the activity of my thinking. The thoughts that I hold in my mind with enthusiasm and consistency tend to come into existence. And we see evidence of that. You're shaking your heads, so you see that too. You see that as you groom your thoughts and nurture your thoughts in the what you wish to experience in life, letting go of some of those old beliefs that don't serve our good, that have never been true about or for us anyway. We let them go, and we hold fast to those thoughts that enrich us and nourish us. Chapter 5. I walk down another street. Oh, we still feel so empowered. We've recognized this street has holes. I'm not going to go down that street anymore. So we celebrate that as well. We've changed our behavior. We've changed our way of being, our way of showing up, our way of walking down the sidewalk. And we remember, this new sidewalk may have holes of its own. This new sidewalk may have holes that we've never experienced before. But we know the rules of the holes in the sidewalk. We know how to navigate them. We know how to walk around them. Or if we happen to slip into one of them, we know how to get out of those holes in the sidewalk. Once on that new street, we're awake and alert and aware of what's going on around us. We're aware of our impact on our lives, and we're aware of our impact on that greater consciousness, that collective consciousness. So we're careful about how we listen to the news, what we allow into ourselves, so that we are in charge of and aware of what our contribution to that consciousness is, that greater consciousness. Now, I, for one, I can take the news in very, very small pieces. And then I get sucked into the tragedies, the woes of the world, the political discord, the unrest. Now, as a contributing person to humanity, I want to contribute responsibly. So I want to know what's happening in my world. But I also know, ultimately, my job is to hold the highest good for my world. My job is to hold that sacred space for all beings in my world. And when I can do that, I'm contributing compassion. I'm contributing love. I'm being the presence of love. And by being that, I'm sharing that with those around me. I'm consciously sending love to the people of Ukraine. I'm consciously sending love to the people of Russia. My job is not to judge and sort it out. My job is to be the presence of love, whatever shows up. The universe, spirit, the divine will sort it all out in ways that I cannot even imagine. I just hold space for all of that to happen in the right and perfect times. So as we walk down that sidewalk, that new sidewalk, awake and aware, we might notice the process. It's a process that's leading us upward in our consciousness. It's a process that might wind around a mountain until we reach the top. It's a process that calls us to be more than we've been in the past, but not as much as we're going to become. And philosopher David Hawkins said, our role in this world is to expand our consciousness. And as we expand our consciousness, we call each other into that expansion as well. We call others into being more than they were yesterday, but not as much as they will become as well. It's one of the foundations of life. And in that expansion, it's a striving to become whole. And becoming whole means that we accept and embrace and love every part of ourselves. Those pretty, polite parts of us and those sarcastic, negative parts of us, that we welcome that to be transformed into the goodness of the whole. It's not leaving anything behind. Choices are made, and we're responsible for our choices. We're responsible for what we contribute to our own individual lives and to the lives of each other. The holes in the sidewalk are actually invitations. They come in peculiar ways, but they're invitations for growth, for wisdom, for understanding. So will we accept that invitation to do all of those things that we're called to do? Yesterday, I had the privilege of being at the memorial service for Jim. And what I noticed was no one spoke of the times he fell into the hole in the sidewalk. No one spoke about any time he may have failed in life or fallen short of anything. Everyone spoke about his kindness, about his greatness in size and stature, but also in the greatness of his heart. I had 2 conversations with Jim, and I remember them well. Gentle, kind, generous. So remember that regardless of how our days go, how many holes we fall into, this is what is remembered of us, is how we showed up for each other, how we showed up as that expression of love, how we showed up as part of humanity. So we choose how we show up and how we give. And we can all be Jims in our own way, in our own person. Namaste, and thank you so much for allowing me to be with you today.